Hi, everyone. I'm Amanda from She Should Run, and I'd like to welcome and thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Reclaiming Women's Power, One Issue at a Time, sponsored by Makers. This lively conversation will cover how different women leaders are talking about issues for themselves and their communities. And so before we get started, I have a few housekeeping items to mention. ASL interpreters and closed captions are available to the audience to use during this time during the webinar. And following the webinar, we would greatly appreciate if you would take a couple of minutes to complete our post-webinar survey. It's linked in the description box below, and your responses are essential to ensuring that we continue to provide high-quality programming. Now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce our moderator for this event, Angelica Arnold. Angelica is the community manager at Makers, a Yahoo media and community brand dedicated to accelerating equity for women in the workplace and beyond. She works at the intersection of partnerships and storytelling to support makers around the world who are taking action and driving impact. One of her favorite parts of her job is writing the Makers newsletter. And in her spare time, Angelica is solar powered, always seeking time outdoors and striving to facilitate self and community care as a yoga teacher. So thank you so much for joining us, Angelica, and I will pass the conversation over to you.
Thank you, Amanda, for that wonderful introduction, and to She Should Run for having me. I'm honored to be here on behalf of Makers. I want to thank and welcome all of you to this webinar, Reclaiming Women's Power, One Issue at a Time. At this event, we want to offer women information on how issues that are deemed political affect our daily lives, tangible actions they can leave with to make positive change in their communities, and hope in an otherwise exhausting election season. I actually have a mayoral and city council election coming up in my community, so this is timely and important. Back in 2023, utilizing data from She Should Run and research from YWCA and UN Women, it was revealed that women are more likely to take action and consider running for elected office when motivated by issues such as climate change, reproductive health, gun violence, racial justice, and education over just gender equity alone. She Should Run is committed to significantly increasing the number of women considering a run for public office. So data like this is critical in finding new and innovative ways to meet the 24 million women who aren't thinking about running for office, but should be. So today I'll be joined by two inspiring leaders who will speak to us about the issue areas they participate in and how you too can become an issue leader for your community, and maybe even consider if elected office is right for you. So with that, I'm excited to introduce our speakers. First up, we have Abbey Clements. Abbey is the executive director, co-founder, and board member of Teachers Unify to End Gun Violence. She is a survivor teacher of the Sandy Hook school tragedy in 2012 and an elementary educator for over 30 years. Abbey has been a gun violence prevention activist since the tragedy, including as a Moms Demand Action volunteer leader in several different roles, and as a strategic consultant on gun violence issues for the American Federation of Teachers, also known as the AFT. She has been featured in publications like AFT Voices, Bullets into Bells, Marie Claire, and USA Today, as well as in several documentaries, including Newtown and If I Don't Make It, I Love You. Charo Valero. Born and raised in Panama City, Panama, Charo is a proud immigrant and queer Latina feminist. She is an activist and organizer, connecting communities to politics and amplifying our collective power. Charo Valero currently serves as the Florida State Manager for the National Latina Institute for Reproductive Justice, advocating and educating at the intersection of reproductive health and immigration. Whether in her professional life or her work supporting initiatives in her community, Charo strives to inspire and build solidarity amongst women and femmes, queer folks, and folks of color. Welcome, Abbey and Charo. Awesome. It's great to see you both, and thank you for joining me today. I'm going to jump right into some questions. This one will be for both of you. So according to She Should Run's research, the majority of women are motivated by issues that disproportionately affect them and their communities. And this is consistent across demographics and ideologies. What was the issue or experience that encouraged you to take action and get more intentionally involved? Abby, let's start with you.
Thank you so much for having me. This important conversation. It's an honor. After the tragedy, I was a completely changed person. I wouldn't say complete. I always voted. I went to a handful of protests, especially in my 20s. And I cared about issues. You know, I watched the injustices happen, unfold on our televisions every night. And we tried to teach our kids what was right and wrong and how the disproportionate injustices that happen in communities across the United States impact safety. And we also knew that we were in a country with more guns than people. And we saw unfold tragedy after tragedy, from Columbine to community tragedies to unintentional shootings. But it was after the tragedy when I personally had to get involved. I started finding myself more vocal, both in the school aftermath, which, as you can imagine, was very, very challenging, to say the least. I was suddenly trying to advocate for the educators who came in day after day after the tragedy, caring for their impacted students at the detriment of our own health, really. So I found myself starting to yell, scream, advocate for, writing letters, trying to organize my colleagues on this issue. And then shortly thereafter, I joined the gun violence prevention movement.
Thanks, Abby. Charo, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think as women and femmes, we always see in our communities that it's women and femmes who carry the world on our shoulders and the ones who make it happen. And I've been really blessed and lucky to have very strong women in my family, and I'm the daughter of the matriarch. So I always felt a sense of responsibility to caring for family and making sure that we were all taken care of and that we remained united. And that's just separate, right? That's just to that sense of responsibility and commitment to like community, right? I moved to the United States, Miami specifically, when I was 23 years old. I came out when I was in this country because when I lived in Panama, that wasn't really an option. It wasn't, queer people weren't really visible to me. Coming out politicized me. It also sent me on a quest to find community. And then community led me to volunteering, which led me to the nonprofit world. Also becoming a naturalized citizen also politicized me, not just because I had to take a test, but also I just learned to embrace my civic duty and just became really curious about political education and politics in general, which is also part of why political education is so important to me. So what politicized me was the issues of the LGBTQ community. That was like my entry point. I came out and I started getting politicized around the time of marriage equality. However, LGBTQ organizing can be very single issue, right? And I didn't feel represented because I'm not just a queer person, I'm also a woman, I'm also an immigrant, there's so many other identities. So finding reproductive justice for me and finding statewide and local politics and policy was really what politicized me and really like ignited this fire in me. And I was very lucky to find an org like Latina Institute.
Thank you for both sharing your journeys. Charo, I'm going to come to you next. Many women tuning in may feel like you feel overwhelmed by the number of issues they care about, and some may be unsure of where to start. Given that you do advocate for various causes like reproductive justice, immigration reform, what advice would you give to women who are looking for just a starting point?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So Yeah, it can be very overwhelming, and I'm grateful for my journey as an immigrant to coming here, not really making sense of what was happening, to then, you know, becoming a citizen, political education, and now being a political educator, right? And a lobbyist at one point, and an organizer, and so many things. So that is why, to me, political education is so key in everything we need to do. We cannot assume. People might be upset, but what we find is that some people don't even know who their elected officials are. So we can't make any assumptions about what people know and do not know, because it's not like civics is something that is taught in schools, right? So we may understand the issues that we care about, and we may feel very strongly in our convictions, right? But the overwhelming part is really navigating the system, understanding the limitations of the system, understanding the limitations of what we can do. But I think the first thing is you just have to start, right? Like you identify orgs that are either online and or in your area, right? In your state, in your county, that you trust, right? Research them, find out why they believe what they believe, understand their values, articulate your values. Why do you believe what you believe, right? Find your political home. It doesn't always have to be an org, right? Orgs have their limitations, right? It could be a blogger or a thinker. Do your own research. If you have disposable income, donate, join a board, get your friends to donate to this board. If you have time, volunteer. Volunteering is not just a wonderful way of building movement and helping and supporting and being a part of the movement, but also it's building community. My bestest friends come from the 15 years of doing work in my community, right? And also just being realistic, right? The world is a little messy, right? The world, things are, you know, I live in Florida, so sometimes I'm looking forward to the hope question, because sometimes my outlook can be a little, not apocalyptic, but just scary, right? I live in Florida. These are very testing times in so many different ways. But I think it's having realistic expectations of what your power is, your community power is, what the limitations are, you know, understanding that. Again, back to political education.
Thank you so much, Charo. Yes, education is key. And I'm gonna head back to Abbey because she has had a long-standing career, not only as an educator, but also as a gun violence prevention activist and consultant for 12 years, neither of which are easy jobs. So can you speak to how you sustain momentum throughout your career and overcome challenges that you've encountered in these roles?
Yeah, Charo, I love what you said. So I second all of that. And I think that is part of really this question. And it's about reasonable expectations, but also not falling into that like tunnel of despair. I'm not saying I don't go there, because there are certainly times, especially with the news cycle the way it is, with the mass shooting after mass shooting, but even also the small shootings in communities are just like, they wear on me. And there, of course, are times where I have to step back a little bit, take a breath, you know, wait to look at social media for a little while, and come back. So I don't want to say that there aren't times of real discouragement, almost like feeling that despondency. But with those reasonable expectations and understanding that this movement of safety and wellness for the citizens of this country is really long-term, and knowing that like any part that I can play in that trajectory, it's worth it. And I think, you know, changing it up, maybe, you know, like you're saying, volunteering for one thing and saying, you know what, I don't think that really was for me, but I'm going to try this instead of like, I feel like sometimes we go into one room, one environment, one event, and have these large expectations, and really just understanding that like this is just a piece, and you're learning what you're good at, what you like doing, what challenges you. So I think what sustained me is that I want this to be a safer place for my kids, for my grandkids, for everyone's children and their children. And so, what could we do differently, and what can we do long term that can lead to that?
Yeah, I love what you both are saying about starting where you are and really figuring out your surroundings and what's around you and getting started there. And that leads me to my next question. We'll have both of you answer this one. She Should Run is an organization that encourages women to consider running for political office. So I think we need to talk about women's representation in politics and other leadership roles. You are both leaders. From your perspective, what will it take to see more women in public office? And what impact would you anticipate seeing more women in office would have on the causes that you care about? Charo, let's start with you.
Great, thank you, Angelica. So running for office is a privilege. You need the kind of job that can sustain you while you're legislating, that can give you the time off that you need. You need the networks to fundraise. You also need this thick skin. I was a registered lobbyist in Florida for 6 sessions, and I saw a lot of brilliant, capable women be defeated and jaded because the machine, right? But I've also seen women with really deep community ties and decades of incredible work win local elections, right? But also, I just want to say that more women in public office is not always the solution, right? And in Florida, it's women who push and lead on anti-abortion policies. In Florida, specifically Miami-Dade County, it's the Miami-Dade County delegation, which is mostly Latina and mostly immigrant or second-generation folks that are pushing anti-immigrant policies and rhetoric, right? It's not just having women running, it's key to have a pipeline of qualified folks who share our values and understand fully what they're getting themselves into.
Yeah, I truly understand that. Abby, do you have something to add?
Yeah, I think in terms of your question, like what will it take? Where does this start? To encourage women to not only run for office, but to seek positions of power or leadership roles. Maybe sounds a little bit better. And I think it's the way we raise young girls. I see it in the classroom still after 32 years. I just finished my 32nd year of teaching. And I still see it where girls invariably are taught a little bit different. And I mean, it might just be like small things, but you can see it in a room, what's expected of a girl, what's expected of a boy. And it's disheartening in this day and age to talk about that. But I think, again, this trajectory of change that it's how do we want there to be a level playing field, and there certainly is not one to begin with. And I think I think this women finding their community that often includes women or is mostly women, we lift each other up. And I think the more women find their place in this kind of a community, the more they can find themselves reaching for positions and raising their voices like they'd never done before. And I know that from experience. I was kind of always a rule follower as an elementary school teacher, and really speak out on a whole lot of things, worried about a whole lot of things, and not that that still doesn't happen. But I find that it's my community members that help lift me up. And you start to have to train your brain not to say, oh, I can never do that. I can't possibly do that. I am not strong enough for that. I'd be too afraid of what people would say. And those are some, I think, tendencies that we maybe, older women go to, sadly. But I think it's communities that help break those down And I know that I wouldn't be able to, the thought of starting an organization for teachers who are also predominantly women, who also rarely get their voices heard, especially on the issue of gun violence, when gun violence lives in classrooms across the country and families and communities all over that they deal with on a daily basis. I could never have done this a couple of years ago, starting an organization with 2 other women, had it not been for this community of gun violence prevention activists and other friends in different movements of empowerment.
Yeah, and if I can add one more thing, because so I think it's also about having the networks and surrounding yourself with folks who believe in you, right? Believing in yourself, what you bring to the table, your experiences, what you know to be true. Imposter syndrome is real amongst women, right? And so when I applied for this role at the Latina Institute for my previous role, which was a policy role, I was conflicted. I was wondering, am I qualified? Can I do this? And a friend of mine, a man, told me men apply for roles they're unqualified for all the time. And I applied and I got it, and I wasn't unqualified at all. So I think it's also like checking yourself. There's something in us, right? That makes us think that we are not good enough or that we're not qualified. And we absolutely are. And we bring so much to the table. We just need to believe in ourselves. And if we need that push, then we need to surround ourselves with people that believe in us. And then eventually we'll start believing in ourselves too.
Yeah, I think that's really important. We both kind of talked about finding shared values in your community and finding spaces and folks that can make you feel uplifted, and you can also empower them, so the energy goes both ways. So I think your points about community really make sense for this audience, especially who are coming to an event like this, who are looking for others or other ways to get involved. So thank you both for that. Abbey, you started to talk about how you found your community, and given your experience as a survivor of gun violence and the heaviness that comes with discussing that topic day in, day out, how did that community and finding it benefit you in your advocacy work, especially to end gun violence?
Oh, there's no doubt I would not have been able to sustained involvement in this movement were it not for the community of survivors who I've met and have continued to meet. There's sort of this understanding of like a lifelong yearning for both getting your own sense of safety back, but also wanting that for others. And although there are so many ways that we are impacted by gun violence, it's like a patchwork of folks who you have supporting you, who are in your corner, who you check in on those anniversaries, who you know, if you haven't heard from them in a while, you check in and make sure they're okay. And this is just, it's I think unique, and it's very powerful. And I hate that and people say, well, I hate that we're in this club that nobody wants to belong to. But were it not for this community, I don't think I would have been able to continue teaching. As you know, we experience these traumas, and then we have to move on. We have to continue on with our daily lives, which, I mean, people don't really talk about because that's not the glorious part of the story. That's like the slog of having to walk the same path, having to enter the same building if that's what you have to do, or having to make a change in your career because of something horrible. Those things we don't really talk about, but in this community we really do. So I am eternally grateful for knowing, and I try to remember the stories that I hear, even if I don't get to meet people, you know, so many impacted every day, 120 Americans killed by a gun and hundreds wounded, and witnesses, and, you know, the loved ones who care for those. So, but I try to, like, slow down and say their names and sort of remember and think about them, because this is what we want, what we're working for, to end this.
Thank you so much. And I want to commend you on both joining community, building a community for such an important issue. Charo, question for you. Being a queer, Latina, feminist, immigrant, activist, organizer, and community builder, how do you think identity and intersectionality have played a role in how you advocate, organize, and educate others in both your personal and professional life?
Yeah, thank you. So I want to start by defining reproductive justice. Reproductive justice is the ability to have or not have children, to decide if and when you want to have children, when you want to have them, and to raise these families in safe and thriving environments and communities. Reproductive justice is absolutely informed and shaped in every way how I see organizing, advocacy, education, and it's the framework that fits most for me, right? We don't live single issue lives, like Audre Lorde said. It is key to also understand that intersectionality, reproductive justice and intersectionality, were both born of Black feminism. Specifically, intersectionality was a term that was coined by Kimberly Crenshaw, who was a lawyer who needed to articulate how the different forms of oppression combined resulted in a unique compounded oppression. It was the experience of being Black and the experience of being a woman. So that, again, right, having all these identities, right, being an immigrant, being queer, being a woman of color, all these, we don't live single issue lives, right? So you need to take an intersectional approach. It's so much greater, right? In my personal life, being socialized, a woman, my queerness and everything that comes with being a queer person, coming out, migrating to a different country and all that that entails. All of that made me more compassionate and humble, but it also like gave me this hunger and a yearning for justice. All of that has absolutely informed why I do what I do and how I show up to the work. In my professional life, it's a privilege in this capitalist economy to get to do such significant work and get to be an advocate, but also get to do such liberative work, right? I come from an accounting background. That was what I did before I did this work, before I got into organizing and policy advocate. So I attribute everything to reproductive justice, to intersectionality, to the brilliance of Black women, and reproductive justice, which is inherently an anti-racist framework, is everything to me and has really grounded me, has really, given me all the insight, all the courage, all the hope that I need, and really understanding and grounding myself in the generations of struggle and resistance, specifically of Black and Indigenous folks in this country.
Thank you so much. Kimberly Crenshaw is a maker's favorite as well. So we talk a lot about intersectionality in our community as well, across demographics, ideologies, all identities. So I think that is really important. Question for both of you. Election years can bring up all sorts of emotions around politics, apathy, disappointment, anger, guilt, you name it. What advice would you give women in our audience feeling hopeless about politics and the issues they care about most? Charo, let's start with you.
Thank you. Like I mentioned earlier, I live in Florida. So I understand this too well. I do organizing and policy work in Florida, right? At the federal level and at the state level and at the local level, at so many levels. But Abbey, what really stayed with me is what you say, like that urge to, like resisting that urge to fall into this tunnel of despair. And especially doing the issues that we do at Latina Institute, which is the intersection of abortion access and immigrant women's rights. So I really, again, going back to the brilliant Black feminist thinkers, and really Mariam Kaba said that hope is a practice and a discipline. So I too struggle with hopelessness, and it's grounding myself and making hope a practice and a discipline, and surrounding myself with folks who are on the same page as I am, and knowing that I am doing all I can, that I am doing the best I can. But yeah, it is absolutely perfectly normal and expected to feel that in this world that is just, yeah. So yeah, so ground myself in folks. We've been here before, right? Folks have been fighting for justice for generations. So identify these folks, really ground yourself in their teachings, really have your practice of mindfulness and intentionality and hopefulness, and really make a discipline out of that. And when you feel a little lost, come back to it and surround yourself with folks that are also on that same trajectory.
Yeah, I love that. I became a yoga teacher in 2020 because of how I was feeling about everything the world was going through. So I really appreciate finding a grounding space. Abby, you want to jump in?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's just too much at stake to allow yourself to just throw up your hands and say, well, nothing's going to change, nothing's going to get better. There are very concrete reasons why this election in November will shape possibly your life, and no doubt the lives of the generations coming up. So I do think it is about talking to people. Like, we don't have to carry it on our shoulders. I think especially women, we carry these worries and these burdens on our shoulders. And, you know, you might be afraid to talk about it at a dinner because you're thinking, oh, this is depressing. But I think when you talk about it and you let go, and you can have a conversation where you pare down what is possibly at stake here, or what, not even possibly, what is at stake when you look at the Supreme Court, when you look at rights of women. You know, women are dying because of these draconian laws that are, you know, spreading like wildfire. And so I think we get all, we think in absolutes, like, this is awful, I can't do it, I'm so depressed, I'm not gonna vote for anybody. And that will just like hurt ourselves and our children and their children, and generations to come. So I think it's helping each other again with that community, but like even your coworkers, you know, I think people are afraid to talk about it, but like, if you talk about it, maybe it'll help you really break down for you, so that you feel good about going into you know, casting your ballot in November, that these are the reasons. Okay, you know, pare it all down to 1, 2, 3 reasons, so that you're not just throwing up your hands, because in doing so, really what you're doing is by giving into that fear and despondency is, you know, we could find ourselves in some really horrendous situations.
Yeah, I think that's really important, to keep going. Like, there's a point where you feel like you need to stop, but ground yourself and get back to it, find your community and keep going. So I appreciate both of your answers. Before we get to our final question, I would greatly appreciate if you all who are watching could complete our survey after today's webinar, which is linked in the description below and through a link you'll see on your screen. Your input helps She Should Run continue to improve its programs and provide insightful and helpful resources for women like you. Please join She Should Run again on Wednesday, September 4th for the final webinar in this election series, Your Vote and Then Some, where speakers will talk about how you can show up for your community beyond voting to ensure your voice is being represented. You can subscribe to She Should Run's channel to be notified, or use the link below to register. And then one more plug for my home team, Makers. We're a media and community brand powered by Yahoo, dedicated to accelerating equity for women in the workplace and beyond. We leverage content, conferences, and experience to support, inform, and motivate our community to take action that drives change. So check out our website, makers.com, to learn more about our newsletter, which I write, partnerships, and social media, and more. So we have one more question today, and I will start with Charo. What is one thing you would encourage a woman in our audience to do today if they want to become more involved around an issue they care about.
Fantastic, thank you. And I'd love to subscribe to that newsletter, by the way. Yeah, so I would say to get involved, I think articulate those issues. What are those issues that matter to you? Research, learn more about them. Identify those values. Why do you believe what you believe? Be clear. Find those orgs, donate time, donate money. Speak up, get comfortable having conversations with your family, with your neighbors. Find and build community. Always prioritize your safety and self-care. And find and prioritize joy. You cannot pour from an empty glass. And also joy, especially as oppressed or marginalized folks, is revolutionary.
And then Abby, what is one thing you would encourage a woman in our audience to do today if they want to become more involved around an issue they care about?
Well, all the things that Charo said, and I especially love the joy piece, because sometimes we think gun violence prevention, I mean, obviously it's so heavy and difficult uphill battle. But it is about finding your people who you can talk to about this, and it will help you work it through for yourself on what you want to do and where you want to spend any free time that you might have. And I think just going for it, maybe don't overthink it. Like find an opportunity in your community where you could like do something you're invited to go participate in, or maybe you seek it out yourself and you ask a friend to go with you, because that's where you'll have fun. Maybe you'll be able to talk about it and debrief it after, and you'll say, what do you think we could do next? And that's really important. That will keep you invested. And I think ask the questions. The other thing, it's not one thing, but another thing is asking questions. Like, if you're at a back to school event, ask the questions. What are the drills like? Do the kids have time to decompress afterwards? Ask the questions about maybe some local legislators, the school board members coming through, to start paying a little bit more attention. Don't be afraid that it's too upsetting. Just open up yourself to the possibility of getting a little bit involved, and it's that feeling of empowerment that keeps us motivated, and keeping up the faith and keeping that hope up, and you're also a role model for your family, so you can inspire others to do that as well.
Thank you so much. Joy and curiosity is what I got from that, and I would love to carry that through not just my day-to-day, but moving forward, and when I get to vote in those elections that are coming up, making sure that I'm informed, I ask questions, and that I move forward knowing that I'm making a difference, even if I'm just doing something small like voting in a local election. So thank you to Abbey and Charo. This has been super informative and thoughtful. I know that I'm encouraged and motivated by you all sharing your passion and your purpose, and inspired by both of your leadership. So again, thank you to those watching for showing up today to hear from our speakers, and we'll see you next time.